All right. So, Mr. Bryan Boorstein, welcome back on the show.
Yeah, man. Always good to be here and connect with you.
Yeah. So we actually had a similarly themed podcast as the one I'm hoping this one to be. So we're going to be talking about cardio stuff, being some sort of a hybrid athlete of sorts. We also had another one, which unfortunately I forgot to press record on, which was on basically why CrossFitters have such good abs. If you remember that,
Yep.
that one was a very interesting podcast episode. It's a shame that it got lost. Maybe sometime in the future we can repeat that. But yeah, so cardio. The last time that we talked about this, I was very much just in a stage of, or in a phase of, thinking about how I should do some cardio. I knew that you and Dave had been on that train for a while already at that point, but everything that you said at the time were interesting, but I could not relate to as many of the things based on my own experience. But now it's different. I hopped on that train myself, so yeah, everything will just hit closer to home. With that, where are you at with your interest in cardio and combining that with weightlifting these days? Let's say the past year or so.
Yeah. Really quickly, let's just go back like 4 or 5 years when I started doing cardio, because at that point, I think that my interest in it was much more performance based, and I was really trying to optimize the combination of, how can I be the best cardioer that I could be, or biker in the case of my interest at the time, which was biking, still is. And how can I combine that with lifting and also optimize my lifting? So I was really trying to create a paradigm in which I was able to continue to progress my hypertrophy and my strength while also improving my performance on the bike. And through the first few years of doing this, I legitimately was preparing for bike races. I did a 50-mile gravel mountain bike type race that took right around 3 hours. So that was the longest endurance event I've ever done in my life. And I've done a couple other slightly shorter races since then. And also at the time, really trying to improve and optimize the lifting stuff. And I think I went a little bit too hard on both. It took me about a year of doing it a little bit too much volume of each before I realized that the secret sauce is actually in kind of that balance between the two a little bit more. So I actually improved surprisingly even though I was overtraining. I was lifting 5 days a week and doing cardio 6 days a week the first year or two that I was doing it. And I made it all the way until like August. So from like March to August, doing it that way until my body was like, nah, dude, you need to pull back somewhere. So at that point, I knew I had this race coming up. I had to pull back on one. It was going to be lifting. And I basically dropped my lifting all the way from 5 days a week down to 2 days a week. I just went like one upper body day and one full body day. And that was actually perfect because it allowed me to optimize my biking ahead of the race. But what I've realized over time is that the best balance for me, and this goes to your question about how's the last year been, the best balance for me is simply alternating days of cardio and weights. And I more or less just do that every day. I would say 1 or 2 days a month, I'm forced to take a day off through family obligations or travel or something like that. But for the most part, I'd say 28, 29 days a month. I'm just alternating cardio one day, weights the next, cardio the next, weights the next. Sometimes I'll do 2 cardio days in a row if I feel like my body's beaten down from a heavy lifting session or something like that. But I'm pretty much averaging 3 lifting sessions and 4 cardio sessions each week. And obviously oscillating between the intensity levels of the cardio and manipulating that around the various, weightlifting focuses that I have. And that's been so good that it's become the backbone of my subscription programs at my companies as well. I have a few different options now for 3 days of lifting with 3 to 4 days of cardio. And that seems to be working really well for a lot of people.
Okay, very cool. So just to backtrack to what you said, that initially you were overdoing it on both.
Yeah.
Was that out of a fear of losing progress on the lifting side of things, or what What was the reason for going so hard?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think back to what the hypertrophy space was like in 2020, it was very much volume is the driver of hypertrophy. And that if you're not lifting with sufficient volume, which meant a lot of time commitment, that you were going to be leaving gains on the table. And it's funny how things have shifted quite a bit in the space, because now it's almost like swung full circle or half circle, I guess 180 degrees, where now you have people trying to see how low of volumes they can go. I don't know if you saw that recent video by Jeff Nippard, but he cut his volume essentially into like a third of what he was doing, and did like DEXA scans along the way and strength measurements and all pictures, all the different things, and literally added muscle in the last 70 days of his 100-day experiment by cutting his volume down to a third. I think that you see a lot of this kind of shape shifting in the industry, and it's been well timed, because I realized, after that experiment in 2020, 2021, that high volume wasn't going to work for lifting if I was also going to be pursuing these performance goals in cardio. And it's great that, not only did I realize that I can continue to gain, or at least maintain just fine by lowering my volume significantly, but that also opened up a lot of recovery currency that can then be used to improve the cardio.
Right. Not to go into this in too much detail, because for one, I did enough podcast episodes on that, and that's not the topic for today, but the volume stuff, because I'm also seeing sort of like a new resurgence of the high volume stuff at the same time from some of these heavily science-based folks. Like Eric Helms now seems to be a bigger believer of high volume than perhaps ever before. Greg Knuckles came out with that pretty big paper of his. It's more of an ebook than a paper, really, which basically says that like super high volumes basically work, and that if you're not seeing the benefits, there are probably reasons for that. Where would you say the industry is at on that in general?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of that stuff with Helms is kind of driven by the work that we see recently through the data-driven strength guys, who, to your point, are very like scientific based and everything, but their kind of meta regressions that they've done have shown two interesting things. One, they did on failure, and they showed that working closer to failure produces more hypertrophy than being further from failure, which I think is pretty intuitive. And then they also had another one that showed that the dose response of volume essentially increases forever. However, the thing that I think you have to keep in mind with those studies that show volume increasing forever is almost all of the studies that are done on high volume training are done at the exclusion of training the full body with high volume. So it's like, we're going to do a study on the biceps or on the quads, and we're going to jack up volume to 20, 30, 40, 45, 50 sets on this muscle group. But they're not having people do that across their entire body, right? That would be an insane amount of volume. So these studies are legitimately binary in the sense that they're choosing one muscle group, and they're going to thrash that muscle group, put everything else on maintenance or lower, or in some cases, there's studies out there that people aren't training at all on the other body parts. They're simply coming in and doing bicep curls for 40 sets a week and then not training anything else. Or for the people that are training other stuff, they're told to not, obviously you're not going to do 50 sets on every body part across your body. So keep training the way you normally would, but we're going to jack this one body part up. So that doesn't really give us a lot of confidence that the right way to train is to simply do 30, 40, or 50 sets per body part across all body parts. I don't think anyone would actually argue that that's what's happening. I mean, it's not what's happening in the studies, right? So anyway, I think that that's one important caveat to keep in mind, in that high volume likely does work, but it likely works on more of an acute basis where you're maybe oscillating the body part that you focus on and dropping everything else, and then adding volume there. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is that, and it's in a similar line, is that we just have a base level of recovery that we're capable of utilizing. And that's going to be different for everybody, and it's going to be very dependent on lifestyle. So you and I and Dave were talking about Steve Hall the other day and how he's making these incredible improvements year to year through jacking his volume up and all the stuff. But the other thing that we discussed was that he's literally optimizing his entire life around that one pursuit. He does his steps, he lifts weights, he sleeps every night for, I don't know, 8 to 10 hours, whatever he does. I'm sure it's a lot. He eats the right amount of protein. He eats high quality carbs. He, like, everything in his life is specifically done to optimize his ability to build muscle. When we're talking about somebody that's trying to have these two different pursuits at the same time, there's already an inherent limiter there through recovery. And then you think about, the fact that it's just one body part that's being escalated in these studies, that the rest of life for a normal human like us, who, like me, I have kids and I have a job and all of these things. I have a wife that I have to cater to. And like, there's all these excess stressors in my life that could present at any moment. And I'm trying to do cardio and improve at cardio on top of that. So I think it's just important to keep all of that in mind as you think about the kind of dose responsive volume.
Right. Okay. So you drop back volume quite a bit. Now you're doing alternating days. And so what is your goal at the moment? I remember at the time we talked about how you had this epiphany around the time you turned 40. You took some trip to the mountains or something, and then you reflected on how things went, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And so that was very much like a longevity focused step from you. Did this pursuit transform in some ways? Did you develop new goals and new pursuits on this cardio theme for yourself?
Yeah, good memory on that, by the way. So that epiphany or whatever that I had was a bit longevity focused in that, it made me start mouth taping at night and focus on nasal breathing and introducing cardio into my training and all of these things. But at the time, even though it had that longevity skew to it and that I wanted to be around for the long term, I realized really quickly thereafter that I was still a performance-driven human, and I wasn't just going to kind of settle into this, let me just check the box of cardio, check the box of weights, and move on with my life type thing. At the time, that being the case. So that's why I signed up for that 50-mile bike race and trained for that for a year, and then did another bike race after that and trained for that for a year. So I had these performance goals. And then, like I mentioned, I was still trying to actively improve my hypertrophy. That was the big thing I was, focusing on my Instagram was, look, I'm trying to do both these things and watch me get better at both. I think it's likely debatable whether I did in fact get better at weights, being in my 40s, being 25 plus years into training, beginning to include more cardio. I didn't lose strength. And so I think that that's certainly a positive. In fact, I was able to even gain some strength in some areas, but I don't confidently feel like I was able to maximize hypertrophy, despite my best efforts there. And so when we talk about, this last year, how have I shifted or did it transition at all out of, that? It's actually more gone back to the longevity focus. And that's kind of where I am now. Is I'm less focused on the performance and I'm more focused on kind of checking the box of health. And so that's where I have these 3 lifting sessions. I'm essentially alternating upper and lower each lifting session. I do have one kind of personal performance-based metric that I have in there because I just can't seem to get away from it. So I hadn't deadlifted in 6 or 7 years, conventional deadlift. And so I've been incorporating that back in for the last 12 weeks. And I'm kind of on a mission to see if I can get my deadlift back to my all-time PR, which was 14, 15 years ago at this point. So I've been kind of gradually progressing that up. But for the most part, the weightlifting has been still working out as hard as I ever have, but it's 1 or 2 sets per exercise, basically to failure, depending on the exercise. Obviously not taking some things to failure, but taking other things past failure, like back work and things like that, which we've discussed, using partials and all that. And then the cardio, I try to hit 2 long zone 2 sessions each week and 1 kind of moderate, call it zone 3, maybe low zone 4 session. And then I'll usually try to do 1 session of some higher intensity interval work that I would put in the VO2 max category. So it's usually not anaerobic in the sense that So for it to be VO2 max work, it cannot exceed a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. So something like, 1 minute on, 1 minute off, 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off. That would be the higher end of how much rest you could take. Usually VO2 max work will have the rest be slightly less than the work time. So you might be like 4 minutes on, 3 minutes off, or 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, or something like that. When it starts to go the other way, where say you're like 1 minute on, 3 minutes off, or 1 minute on, 2 minutes off. Now we're in anaerobic zones. So we're no longer working the aerobic system. It's going to be more anaerobic because the rest times are longer than the work times. I tend to do anaerobic work only once or twice a month. And so usually those higher intensity sessions that I do are going to still be in the kind of aerobic spectrum through the work to rest ratio manipulation and stuff like that. But that seems to be what's working for me at the moment.
Okay. All right. So let's dig into that a little bit. So I myself have also started playing around with some performance goals on cardio just to make it more fun. But definitely the longevity aspect and just simply becoming cardiovascularly fitter is something that's intriguing to me. So can we just talk about the different zones? We have done that before, but as a recap and maybe adding some new stuff as well. So could you just explain briefly like what zone is for what? Like what can we accomplish by doing zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, and also that anaerobic stuff? Like, yeah, why do we do those things?
Yeah, so the simplest way to talk about zones might actually be to simply use the physiological zones initially and then expand that out into the kind of more typical 5-zone model. So when you talk about the physiological zones, there's actually really only 3. There's below your first lactate turn point, and then that would be zone 1. And then zone 3 would be above your second lactate turn point. And then zone 2 would be everything in the middle. That's often confusing to people because when you hear zone 2, it's not actually, it's actually zone 1 in the 3-zone model. But the reason that I think it's important to discuss the 3-zone model first is because those lactate turn points are actually like really important physiological pieces that are relevant in the 5-zone model as well. And so when you talk about a lactate turn point, the first lactate turn point where you go from in the 3-zone model from zone 1 to zone 2, that's essentially taking you into a point where you're beginning to burn more carbohydrates than fat. And that's more or less the simplest way to think about it. So when you're in zone 2, you're essentially in a place where you're burning slightly more fat than carbs. It's always going to be some distribution of them. But if you think about it on a spectrum, you're walking, you're going out for a slow walk, you're in pretty good shape. So going for a walk it's not hard for you. In that case, you're burning the majority fat, call it 70% fat, something like that. But you're still burning some carbs while you walk. As you work harder and harder and harder, the ratio of the amount of fat that you're burning to the amount of carbs you're burning begins to shift more and more to carbs. And so that first lactate turn point where you go from zone 1 to zone 2 in the 3-zone model, that's the point where your body shifts to using more carbs. That would be the point where you're actually shifting from zone 2 to zone 3 in the 5-zone model. So there's something that's unique and special that happens underneath that first lactate turn point, because you can essentially just go almost endlessly. I mean, not really, like eventually, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours in, you're gonna at some point probably run out of the ability to continue to go at the same pace. There'll be some heart rate drift, all this stuff occurs, but you should feel for the most part that you can just kind of go at that pace for a really, really, really long time. Then in the 3-zone model, we have the point above zone 2 where it turns into zone 3. And that's essentially in the 5-zone model, that would be like the top of zone 4 into zone 5. So it's when things become unsustainable. That's the biggest thing to keep in mind about that second lactate turn point, is that you go from things being sustainable, even though it's really, really hard, it's still sustainable. You can keep going. And then you shift into a point where you're like, no, I can't keep going anymore. And that is when you shift into that zone 3 in the 3-zone model, or zone 5 of the 5-zone model. So then the area in the middle that would be called zone 2 in the 3-zone model is essentially like it's a sustainable effort that is really hard. It's something you could probably sustain for 30 to 60 minutes, but at the end of it, you would be like, there, I have nothing left. Like that is all I have left. So those are kind of the ways to look at the 3 physiological zones. When we break it down into the 5-zone model, I kind of alluded to some of these points, but zone 1 is essentially walking or like really easy activity. Zone 2 is when you start getting into a point where you're working a little bit harder, but it's still more or less endlessly sustainable. You could have a full conversation with somebody while you're in zone 2. It shouldn't make your workout feel harder by talking. It's just, maybe you don't love to talk. It's kind of like, oh, it'd be cooler if I could stay in my head, but like you definitely can talk. And then when you shift from zone 2 to zone 3, you could still talk, but it's a little bit choppier as you're speaking. A lot of people in the cardio world will call that shift into zone 3, like the early part of zone 3, they'll call it tempo, because you can just kind of like, it feels good. Like it's kind of hard. It's a little harder than zone 2, but you can keep going. It feels good. You feel like you're getting a good workout in. Then you shift into zone 4. And I feel like zone 4 has 2 halves to it. It has the half of it that's underneath the lactate turn point where you're still kind of like feeling like you're in zone 3. And then it has the half of it that is after that lactate turn point where you feel like it's no longer sustainable. It might be more sustainable than like sprinting as hard as you can for 15 seconds. But at some point you're going to, within 5 or 10 minutes of that second half of zone 4, you're going to be like, okay, I need to pull back a little bit and recover. And then zone 5 is just the top end of that, where you reach a point in, say, it's based on heart rate, but as far as effort goes, it's going to be a point where you just can't continue going anymore at a minute or 2 minutes or something along those lines.
Okay. So I think that was actually fairly like illustrative or actionable, like those benchmarks you gave, but to translate it down to very, very concrete stuff that people might be familiar with, because measuring heart rate continuously, I thought that having a smartwatch was enough for that, but turns out it's really not. Like, do you have? I think I asked you that, but do you have one of those bands that you put around your chest that you use?
Yeah, I do. But what's really interesting about that is I have an Apple Watch, and the Apple Watch, at least as of last year, had some like proprietary algorithm that kept the watch from essentially like skipping beats that it doesn't recognize. It like, so what you'll have on other watches is the watch will get confused, and you might be in zone 2, but it will shoot up to like 170 heart rate and then be like, you're like, I'm not in zone 5. Like, why did it shoot up to 170? The algorithm for the Apple Watch essentially told it to ignore outlier beats. So if you're like going along in zone 2 and then the watch thinks that you're at 170 heart rate suddenly, it's just told to like ignore that. Let's just pretend that little snafu never happened. So you get much more clean data on the Apple Watch. So when I did like a month of tests where every time I went out to do cardio, I would have my strap on my chest and I would have my watch. And then at the very end of the workout, I would compare the data from the watch to the strap, and they were almost identical. Like you would look at the max heart rate, the highest achieved heart rate during the workout, they'd be within 1 beat of each other. You look at the average heart rate across the workout, they'd be within 1 beat of each other. And there were none of those snafus where you'd see like that spike to 170 and then back down again. It was just a clean, very straight, consistent line. People that don't have an Apple Watch do seem to be complaining about those issues much more. And I don't know if that algorithm that Apple has is going to be extrapolated out to other brands, or why it seems that Apple Watch seems to be more effective at the moment for that. But I almost never wear the strap anymore because I feel like I validated that it's similar enough to my Apple Watch.
Right. Okay. So so zone 1 would be like just walking. You're walking to the store, like that's zone 1. That's easy, right?
Yeah, I would say like under 55% of your maximum heart rate probably would be like a really good way of going about that.
Right. So then zone 2 would be when you're in somewhat of a rush to, like, you're trying to catch your bus, but like you're not gonna miss it if you're not sprinting or you're not running to it, but like things are getting kind of tight. Would that be roughly like zone 2?
I mean, maybe like I feel like when I've been in a situation where I'm having to run for a flight or a bus or a train or something like that, like I'm not just casually jogging in zone 2. I'm probably in like zone 3, zone 4 effort, but because it's a short duration of time, my heart rate might not actually get up to what would represent zone 4. But if I were to have continued that same effort for, say, 10 minutes or 12 minutes, I would guess that effort of running for the train was not as easy as zone 2 would be.
Right. As far as like time, like for how long should you be able to sustain that kind of effort?
I would say at least 3 hours. Like you don't have to do it for 3 hours, but you should do it for 30 minutes and then be like, oh, I could do another 30 minutes. And then you get to 60 and you're like, cool, that was a good workout, but I could do another 2 hours if I needed to, you know?
Okay. And then so zone 3, so that would be duration wise, is that like the hour mark ish roughly?
Yeah, I think that's about right. There's something called an FTP test, which is functional threshold power. And that test literally has you do an hour as hard as you can. And so by the definition you used, like if you can do it for an hour, you wouldn't actually be in zone 3. Like that FTP test that you do is usually mostly zone 4 and then even gets into like some zone 5 at the end. But that's a test, right? So yeah, like for zone 3, you should be able to do an hour and it feels like that's about the right amount of time. Like not that you're completely dead at the end of the hour, like you would be if you did your FTP test, but more like you did the hour and it was hard. You probably could have gone a little bit further, but you didn't, you know?
Yeah, okay. So that's like, to translate it to lifting language, that would be like a 2 reps or 3 reps in reserve kind of set.
Yeah,
like
I think that's right.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So and then zone 4, like I think it's good that you made the distinction between like the first and the second half of zone 4.
Yeah.
So like when I said that, okay, I ran a kilometer and I gave it my all and I could do it in 3 minutes 52. So would that be like that upper end of zone 4?
Yeah. My guess would be that that's upper end of zone 4, and then in the last minute, you probably dipped into zone 5 quite a bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then lower half of that would be if I did like an easier. So like if my best is 3 minutes 52, if I ran it in like 4 minutes.
I actually think the better example would be to say your 5K, where you're trying to like PR your 5K.
Yeah.
Is likely like mostly the lower end of zone 4. And then as you get toward the last kilometer of that 5K, it probably goes into the high end of zone 4 and then zone 5.
Yeah, that is actually a good example because we talked about it in our little group with Dave, and I mentioned how when I was at that like roughly 3 kilometer mark and that 5K, that's where I was starting to kind of give out mentally. Like I knew that, okay, like the goal that I set for myself originally, which was under 28 minutes, overly ambitious, but like I knew that wasn't going to happen. I was running with my girlfriend. She was like way ahead of me at that point. Like that was a bit discouraging. And so I was even contemplating stopping at that point.
Yeah.
And then I got into this sort of like jogger mode where I was like not springing forward anymore. I was just sort of like hopping up and down on my joints mostly. But I could feel like, okay, like this kind of pace, I could sort of maintain almost endlessly. Probably not endlessly, but yeah, like basically I very perceptively just tuned it back 1 gear, and like, okay, like this was in this tired state still a sustainable-ish pace. Like would that be sort of like zone 4?
Yeah, I think that's right. It's hard. Like you definitely couldn't continue it forever, but it was easier than, redlining and feeling like you're going to have to stop now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's right. I think you were probably hovering in that like mid-range of zone 4 where you're like not teetering over the edge, but you're also not like easy enough to be in zone 3.
Yeah. It's sort of like the pace that I would if I had to run like 20K, which I mean, I was in my teens the last time I did that, but if that was my task and okay, like I get $100,000 if I do that, then that's the kind of the pace that I would start off at.
Yeah, like low zone 4. You definitely wouldn't want to be in the higher end of zone 4 for that run. I mean, you might even for a 20K, like that's 12 or 13 miles. I mean, that's at what, almost 2 hours of running for you.
Yeah.
I would say I don't know if I would want to be in zone 4 at the beginning of that run. I think that probably for me, a 2 hour run, like I'm starting that in low zone 3, and then as the heart rate drifts up and it gets harder, like my heart rate will go up and I'll end up in zone 4. But I think my intention for something that long would probably be to start in zone 3.
Right. Right. And then zone 5, is that basically like the all-out sprint kind of territory, like 100 meters as fast as you can sort of thing?
It really is about your heart rate more than anything. And so it's hard to say, like if you did 100 meters all out, your heart rate probably wouldn't even get into zone 5 because it's just too short. So zone 5 is a condition. It's a condition that you end up in usually as a result of prior effort. So like an example being, you're running your 5K and you're pretty good at staying in low zone 4 for most of it. You get to the final kilometer and you're like, okay, I have a little bit left now because I was so good at my pacing. I now can really like push it for the last kilometer. It's likely that you're going to push yourself into high zone 4. And then in the last half kilometer, maybe you push into zone 5. Maybe there's a hill at the end and you just empty the tank into that hill because the finish line is right there. And you're in zone 5. But yeah, I would say like zone 5 has to be thought of as being unsustainable. And so your example of 100-meter sprint, like by that example, yeah, like that's unsustainable, but it's just too short to actually get your heart rate up to the point where it would be in zone 5.
Right. Yeah. So it's more about the condition as opposed to the pace that you're going at. So that's when you're talking about like basically like increasing your anaerobic threshold. What does that come down to? Like
yeah, I mean, if you're a sprinter, you're not even using anaerobic metabolism much, really. I mean, you are anaerobic, but you're for something as short as a 100-meter sprint, like 10 to 15 seconds, you're essentially using like the creatine phosphate system. Like you're not actually using anything aerobic at all. I don't know that even in the 200-meter that you start doing a whole ton of that. I think that as you get to 400 and beyond, you start using some of that aerobic and anaerobic metabolism a little bit more. But most of the shorter stuff, like 10 to 30 seconds, is going to be done through some of those higher intensity creatine delivery, ATP type systems.
Right. So one question, actually just still on the zone. So one thing that I'm hearing a lot, and I'm understanding that like, if you want to be more cardiovascularly fit, most of your training, like the base of your training, should be zone 2. Can you explain in an easy to understand way why that is the case?
Yeah, you just think of it as like we hear the analogies all the time of your floor and your ceiling, right? Like your floor is here, your ceiling's here. How can we raise your floor? Zone 2 is essentially your floor. It's like how long can go. And so there's even tons of examples in the endurance world of people that someone might have a higher VO2 max than someone else. So look at an elite cyclist. Somebody has a 75 VO2 max and the other guy has a 68 VO2 max. Looking at that, you would immediately think, okay, the guy with 75 VO2 max is clearly going to win this race.
Yeah.
And if the race was a VO2 max race, if it was 2 to 6 minutes long, the guy with the higher VO2 max probably would win the race. However, if the race is 2 hours long, then yes, VO2 max still matters. It raises your ceiling for sure. Mm-hmm. But the guy who has the higher lactate turn point, the person who can stay below their lactate turn point, the person who can burn fat more effectively, or use fat as fuel more effectively than the other person, is likely going to have a better output in a race of that caliber. And so you kind of have to base it off of what the race is and then determine what your orientation of the various zones is going to be for the race that you're training for. And I would say that anything more than 20 or 30 minutes, you're going to need to have a strong base. And the longer you go above 20 to 30 minutes, the more important that base becomes.
Right. And one mistake that I'm now realizing that I'm often making is that when I'm trying to do zone 2, I inevitably end up doing zone 3 accidentally. Like, as much as I can trust the heart rate readings on these cardio machines, if I'm just going off of how I feel while I do it, it's definitely more intense than the pace at which I could still hold a conversation. So I could talk, but yeah, it's choppy. I'm gonna run out of breath if I talk too much, for sure.
Yeah, you're definitely in zone 3 then.
Yeah. And so if you want to be cardiovascularly fit, but not like marathon runner level fit or endurance, then why is zone 3 not a better way of spending your time than zone 2?
Yeah, I mean, it probably is. It's more time efficient, so you can get more done in less time. If your race that you're targeting, or if your cardiovascular fitness that you're targeting doesn't take you beyond 20 or 30 minutes, then you probably have less need for zone 2 strictly to achieve your cardiovascular goals. I think that the thing that a lot of people don't realize or think about enough is that it's not binary. It's not like we are trying to be training two things. You're not saying, I don't care about my lifting anymore, and I'm just going to pursue this one cardio goal at the expense of my lifting. Because in that case, sure, if your goal is to run a 5K or to run a 1K as hard as you possibly can, there's probably less benefit to zone 2 than you'd otherwise think. But when you start realizing that you have to manage the fatigue cost of your cardio, zone 2 is just a way where you can get a ton of stimulus with very little fatigue. And that's really the place where I find that it shines more than anything. And that's the reason that I do so much zone 2, because it allows me to improve my aerobic system, to improve mitochondrial function, to get more time in the saddle, which is the statement of me biking, but it would be time on the ground for a runner or something like that. It's just more time, right? And all of that can be done with such little fatigue that there's almost no impact on your weight training. And so I've just really found those zone 2 sessions to be so crucial to fit around the various days of weightlifting where maybe I'm more fatigued from my heavy deadlift session, or I know I have a hard leg day the next day. And so going out and running hard for 25 minutes is probably not going to be as prudent of a move if I'm trying to do my best to optimize both pursuits at the same time. So I just think there's a lot of benefit to zone 2. Studies have also shown that it gives you a lot of the same mitochondrial and capillary circulatory benefits that you get from the higher zones with that lower fatigue cost. The real only downside to zone 2 is simply that you have to do it for longer to get those benefits. So you kind of have to balance all of that stuff as you make your decisions.
Yeah. So how much time, like I know the frequency, but as far as total cardio time per week, like hours, how much are you doing currently?
Yeah, so because it changes for me between warmer months and colder months, because in the warmer months I bike, and in the colder months I tend to run and row. And biking is just a significantly less efficient way to, you have to do, essentially the way to say that is you have to do more volume of biking to equate to the same adaptations you would get from running or rowing in less time. So what I'll often tell people is a zone 2 bike, you're going to want to do about like 60 to 90 minutes. I'd say 60 if you're on a stationary bike and you're not having to deal with like people and traffic and stops and stuff like that. But probably closer to 90 minutes if you're out in the world biking around trying to do zone 2. Right. For running, you can cut that in half. Like 30 to 45 minute run in zone 2 is usually just as good from an adaptation standpoint. So in the summer months, my zone 2 sessions I usually do them between 90 and 120 minutes. I like to go pretty long for my zone 2. I put on a podcast and I just kind of like look around at the world and bike relatively slowly. And then, so that's like, call it 3+ hours of zone 2. And then I do a 1 hour, like zone 3, zone 4 session, and then a call it 1 hour hit session, but that's, with a little zone 2 on either side of it, and then the hit intervals in the middle. So I would say 5 or 6 hours of cardio in the warmer months. And then in the colder months, it's quite a bit less. Partially because I naturally periodize my year to put more priority into the weights in the colder months, but also because, I'm running and rowing. I'll tend to do probably like I'll run 30 to 40 minutes or row 30 to 40 minutes, and that'll be my zone 2. And I'll do that twice a week. And then the hit intervals are probably about the same time, where it'll be an hour, but I'll have like 30 minutes of intervals in the middle with like some zone 2 on either side, maybe some walking. And then I usually don't even do the zone 3 harder session in the colder months. I usually just have the 2 zone 2s and the 1 hit session. So in the winter months, I might only be doing 2 hours of cardio each week.
Okay. And when in the warmer months, so you're doing for zone 4 as well, and zone 3, you're also doing biking outdoors?
Yeah, I try to run once a week in the summer months just because I don't want to lose that ability. And I'll usually do my run for my hit intervals because I just find it so easy to get my heart rate up running. Yeah. And I have to work so hard on the bike to get my heart rate up. But running, I can literally just find like a small hill and just start running up it. And within 2 minutes, I'm in zone 4. So yeah, I tend to do most of my interval work running in the summer, and then the rest of it's on the bike.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, so if you're doing zone 4 for running, how would that look like roughly for you?
Yeah, it's usually I do a variation of different intervals. I try to stay in the VO2 max range, so where my work period is at least as long as the rest period, if not longer.
Yeah.
So my favorite one that I think I gravitate to more than any others, because I just find it the least difficult to be honest, is 1 minute on, 1 minute off. And I'll do that for 40 minutes. So I get 20 minutes of interval time, and then 20 minutes of, I walk. So 20 minutes of walking, 20 minutes of running. And those intervals essentially get me into zone 4 for the last 30 seconds of each interval. And I think that's just a matter of the lag. So, when you're looking at your wristwatch, you start running, it's hard, you're starting to breathe, but it still shows you're in zone 2 or zone 3. There's a bit of a lag. So for the last 30 seconds of each minute, it'll show me I'm in zone 4. And then usually for the first 30 seconds of the walking minute, it'll also show me in zone 4. So my goal is essentially to get 20 minutes of like time in zone 4. And by doing those 20 intervals of minute on, minute walk, that seems to get me there pretty reliably. I'll also do 2 minutes on, 1 minute off. I'll do 3 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 4 minutes on, 3 minutes off, 5 minutes on, 3 minutes off. I mean, I just try to like mix it up, keep it interesting. The other day I did one that was super fun. It was 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. So each period of running time, I would go as hard as I could for the given period of time. And then I would walk for 2 minutes in between. Maybe it was 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, whatever it was. It was like 5 different sets of decreasing time intervals where I was running hard and then, running 1 minute less. But basically just trying to mix it up, keep it interesting, hit the energy systems. And that's more or less what I'm going for with those.
Right. And so, and if you, it makes sense that if you did some other modality, it would have to be somewhat longer for you to get into that zone. Like running seems to be the most efficient at getting the heart rate up there.
Yeah, rowing does too. Both of those are quite efficient. I've gotten better at doing it with biking, but it's kind of hard to do really specific timed intervals on the bike outside because you're kind of subject to the terrain that you're biking. Yeah. And so I have to plan it where I'm like, okay, this interval, I'm going to be on this section of the trail where it's all uphill. Because if I hit a downhill, then I can't keep my heart rate up.
Yeah, for sure. So why do you think, we talked about this a little bit like privately, but why do you think that running seems to be just, at least for me, it is just so much more of a pure like cardio effort? Obviously I am feeling my muscles on it, but compared to compared to the bike. Like I did the air bike. It is awesome that you can instantly go super hard. So there is no like ramping up to that intensity because it's pushing back against you.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, you're also like pedaling with your hands at the same time. And yeah, like it's instantly, when you go hard, it's instantly super hard. So much so that it's actually quite hard to go light with the assault bike. But it feels like it's so much more of a thigh quad burning effort, more so than a cardiovascular effort. Whereas with running, it's instantly like I can just feel that lung burning effect as soon as I'm starting to push hard. Why do you think that is the case?
I actually would push back and say that I don't know if that's the case for everybody. And I'll use an example of a guy that I talk to in my DMs quite often. And he's always writing me about how like he's been running for a year, 3 times a week, and he just cannot seem to get into like zone 2 doing it because his calves pump up so bad with blood that he has to stop running. And so I, went through this back and forth with him, like, hey, maybe you have really poor lactate clearance. Like maybe you just need to run more. Maybe you need to change your running form, like all of these different things. He can't seem to figure out how to run, but biking for him is like super easy for him to get into zone 2, zone 4, whatever it is. Biking is great. So I do think it's different for everybody, but when you talk about why running is just generally so effective for cardio, and maybe from the lens of why can we run for half or 60% of the time that we would have to do it for biking, like what sense does that make? I think that the reason there is that you're both getting the concentric and eccentric loading with the running. So you're both pushing off the ground and then absorbing the reaction and the stress into the ground. You're also having to support your entire body to stay mostly erect, like 10% forward lean, whatever, but mostly erect. So, you're using your arms to help you pump, all these things. When you're biking, unless you're standing up biking where you're really manipulating the bike and you're going up a hill and you're side to side and all of that, you're essentially just isolating that to your lower body if you're seated on your bike. And you're only doing a concentric cycle. So you have no eccentric loading at all, which actually is why I prefer biking to combine with lifting, because it has no eccentric loading. There's no muscle damage associated with biking, and thus it makes it a better companion to accommodate the lifting goals. But I also think that all of that goes into answer your question as to why running just seems to feel more effective at like a lower dose.
Right. As far as rowing, how do you find like the comparison with running or with biking? Like,
yeah, I think it's much more like running.
Yeah.
So rowing's unique in the sense that it's the only cardio modality, I guess, other than like ski erg or something like that, but of the main ones like running, biking, elliptical, rowing is the only one that actually has a 1 second unloaded period of time where you're literally just unloaded. So the way a proper rowing technique works, right, is you go forward into like your bottom of your deadlift position, and then you push through the heels, activating your posterior chain, and you pull with your arms almost like you would in doing a power clean or something like that. And so it's a very posterior chain driven movement, but all of the effort happens on that concentric. And then there actually isn't even an eccentric. They're simply just going back to the start position. So rowing, I used to find, was a great way for me to take advantage of the fact that I was really strong, but lacked cardiovascular conditioning, because I could just row at an extremely slow stroke rate where I would pull. Honestly, when I was doing CrossFit, I used to row at 18 strokes a minute, which would mean that I'm essentially doing a stroke, pausing for a second, then taking a second to descend. So of the 3 seconds that I had for each rep, only one of the 3 seconds was actually working. And then the other 2 seconds were doing nothing. So I was essentially in an anaerobic state, but doing a rower. It's like at a microcosm, my work time was less than my rest time, 1 second to 2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
But the way that you're actually supposed to row is more at like 28 to 35 strokes a minute, something like that. So it's supposed to be much more cyclical and much more aerobic when you do it properly. But I do think that it is, very unique in the sense that it has that slide stroke where you're unloaded, and neither running nor biking have that component.
Hmm. Yeah. Completely random side note or question. Like, do you not struggle with your foot coming out of the strap after a certain point, or like loosening up?
Never
Never.
once.
Yeah.
I usually put it so that the strap is over closer to the middle of my foot than the front of my foot.
Mm.
So I put the little like stirrup things at setting number 2, which is like one setting away from the shortest it goes. And I don't have a teeny foot. I mean, it's average size for a dude. It's like a 10.5. But I find that the more I can get that strap down to like the middle or front, the third of my foot, instead of being off the toe box, really it makes me feel more secure. And I've never had that issue.
So, a couple more questions for you. So, do you know currently your VO2 max?
I had it tested 2 years ago in a lab, and it did not go well at all. And it went so bad that at the time I'd already planned on hiring a rowing coach for the winter. This was 2 years ago. And there's a test that's quite accurate on the rower to row a 2K, 2,000 meters. And whatever that time is, you then put it into a calculator on the C2 rower website with your body weight and then your time. And it essentially gives you an estimated VO2 max. And when I did that 2K row test, literally a month after I had my proper lab VO2 test, my VO2 max came back 14 points higher on the rower than it did in the lab. So the lab had me at 35, which is insanely low for the amount of like conditioning, like for how I do, like for the fact I placed 4th place at that bike race I did, the 50-mile bike race. There was like 60 people. I placed 4th place. I placed 2nd in my age range. I was only 5 minutes behind the guy that won it. And we're talking about a 3-hour race. And so the fact that like that race could occur within 1 month of me having a 35 VO2 max in the lab, I just really struggle to believe that that was accurate. And then, doing that rowing test and coming back at 49 VO2 max from that point gave me more confidence. So yeah, I don't know where it is. My Apple Watch tells me it's at 47 right now. But who knows, to be honest. I kind of just base it on the fact that my performance is good and I pretty much am faster than all my friends except one when we go out and ride. So that's good enough for me.
Yeah, like, but even like a VO2 max of around 50 for someone like you seems a little bit suspiciously low, no? Like,
I don't know if that's true. I'm in my mid 40s. It's considered to be above average for VO2 max if you're above 47 at my age, according to the online calculators or whatever. And you lose VO2 max every year, like a little bit every decade. You lose what was it? I think it's 10% every decade is kind of the going rate. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just know that 35, like when you look at the charts of like, hey, if you have a 35 VO2 max, these are the things that you should be able to do. And these are the things that might present you a problem. And like none of those things present me a problem. It was like, you would be out of breath going up 2 flights of stairs. And I'm like, oh, I just ran up like 12 flights of stairs yesterday, So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it's possible that my lab reading could have been the wrong one. So I just am not putting too much credence in it, but just acknowledging that, hey, that happened,
Do you know some of these like benchmarks that they're giving? So like if you have a VO2 max of 50, let's say, like what are some things that you should be able to do?
That's a good question, but I think it's as far as mile times go, I think that a 50 is like 7:30, something like that. It says if you're in the 40 to 49 age group, your mile time should be just under 6 minutes if you have a 50 VO2 max. And I cannot run a 6-minute mile at this point of my life. But like when you compare it to the rower, like the example on the rower was the 2,000 meter, which is essentially the equivalent of a 1 mile run. And it takes it's a bit harder than the 1 mile run, but I did it in 7:03 on the 2,000 meter row. Okay. And so that was, that put me right at 49 VO2 max. So I guess that's one of the things you should be able to do at a 50 VO2 max would be under a 7-minute 2K row.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay. Like, and plus like 6 minutes, like a mile in 6 minutes. That's pretty elite level running as far as I'm concerned. Like
I can't do that. I mean, I'm not a runner for sure. So I think like if they would put that into a category of biking or rowing, then I'm much more likely to be able to excel at it than running, because for whatever reason, I just was not born to run. I've literally been running now consistently for last winter, a little bit this summer, and now into this winter. So almost a full year. And I don't really even think I've gotten that much better at running. It's just, it just is what it is,
So what have you noticed as far as like how you had to adjust your diet? Like this might be of interest for people that are into body comp, which is probably most people listening to this. So calorie intake, I don't know if you've been tracking it. Have you noticed that you've been getting away with a lot more food since you've been doing this?
Yeah, a ton more food. I don't track at all. I haven't tracked in 4 years at this point since my last cut. But yeah, I eat a ton. I mean, a ton of food. I only eat between noon and 7 most days. And I fit 3 full meals in there. Plus I usually have 500 to 700 calories of super palatable, sugary food after dinner every night. So I would say it really depends like on what I did that day. If I'm doing a 2-hour zone 2 ride, that burns like close to 2,000 calories. And so those days I do find myself pretty ravenous at the end of the day. And I will go a bit ham on some of the kids' Halloween candy or baked brownies or something like that. But as far as diet overall, like I really spend my first 3 meals trying to make sure that I have all of the important basics in order. So meal 1 is usually chicken, rice, and broccoli, maybe a piece of fruit as well. Meal 2 is like a protein bar, a piece of whole grain toast, some nuts, and another piece of fruit. And then meal 3 is some version just like meal 1. So like some meat, some starch, some maybe veggie, probably just fruit. I only eat veggies once a day. And then after that dinner, I go ham on whatever sort of sweets or like palatable foods I want. But I feel like at that point, I've kind of got the basics in line. I've gotten my fiber for the day. I've gotten my protein for the day. I've gotten all the quality carbohydrate I need. And then the rest of it is simply just because I can. And it's like I need it for the next day. It's like if I don't eat this right now, if I don't have this excess food, then I will go to bed hungry. I will have a poor workout the next day. I won't have properly replenished, all these things. So yeah, I've been eating a bunch more food, but I don't have exact numbers on it.
Right. Would you be able to guesstimate like a ballpark-ish, like within a couple of 100 calories?
I would say I'm likely at about 3,000 calories before I do my late night feasting. And then that late night feasting could be as much as 1,000 or 500. But yeah, I think like 3,500 to 4,000 is probably like a pretty typical average, maybe closer to 3,500.
Right. And at this body comp that you're at now, which maybe you could mention like where you think that is like body fat wise now, but earlier when you didn't do the cardio, how much lower would that have been?
It's a good question. I'd say about 500 calories or so.
Okay.
But I was also like, I was still walking a ton then. So, I mean, I guess I walk a lot now too, but some of the steps that I'm getting are ambiguous because they're through the running. And so it's kind of weird to be like, I did 15,000 steps and I did a run, because it's like, hey, the run was part of the 15,000 steps,
Yeah.
But it feels different because it's a run. But at the end of the day, it's still 15,000 steps. Like whether you did them running or you did them walking, you're still getting the movement in, right?
Sure. And then maybe earlier on, you would have done more weightlifting, right?
Yeah, exactly. I would have had 5 or 6 days of lifting as well as 15,000 steps a day. And now it's 3 days of lifting with 10 to 12,000 steps a day, and then some biking in there, something along those lines.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned how many hours you're doing, but like because maybe it's easier to imagine that way, like in terms of like distance of biking or something, like take like an average summer day. like, or summer week, sorry, like what distances of biking would you cover on what kind of terrain on average? And then, yeah, we can add the weightlifting on top of that. And then,
yeah, the two zone 2 rides would be like 25 to 30 miles usually.
okay.
Which is, 50K, 45 to 50K.
Okay.
Yeah. So those take me, an hour and a half to 2 hours. And that would be twice a week. And then once a week, I do 20 miles of hard zone 3/low zone 4. And then the interval day is another hour, similar output to the zone 3, zone 4 day, just, organized in intervals more. So that's, what are we looking at? What do we say? 5 or 6 hours of biking and then 3 hours of lifting. So 8 to 9 hours of working out each week. And then walking. So I'll walk a little bit, on there. I walk a lot, actually. I would say I probably go out for 2 like purposeful walks every day. And then I get whatever movement I get playing with the kids and stuff as well.
Right. So total mileage per week for biking would be like
30 plus 25 plus 20 plus 20. So 95. Is that right?
95.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in the winter, it would be somewhat less than, I mean, I know you're doing rowing.
Yeah, I'd say 2 to 3 hours of cardio in the winter each week instead of 5 to 6. So like half the cardio.
Right. And then, so what I'm curious about is, have you noticed actually, I'm curious also in lifting, have you noticed that you're getting out of breath less, that your work capacity has gone up? And then in everyday activities, I don't know how much you're doing things like running up the stairs or whatever, carrying heavy groceries or a long distance, but have you noticed in any everyday activity that you're fitter, basically?
Yeah, I think it feels easier to move about the world, if that's kind of what you're getting at there. Like just going through life, carrying groceries, climbing stairs, playing with the kids, whatever. Like, yeah, it's easier to go about life. I'm more easily able to just jump into something higher intensity with my son. Like, he's obsessed with American football these days. And so we'll walk over to this grassy area by my house and he'll want me to do like punts where I'll punt the ball to him and he'll catch it and he'll try and return it and I'll try to tackle him. And those, like, they still get me out of breath sprinting after that kid for like 20 seconds, as it would for anybody. But I definitely find myself recovering faster between those intervals. Recovering faster between sets for sure. I organize almost all of my training now into 4 exercise circuits. Well, 2 exercise circuits for lower body, 4 for upper body. And so I'll rotate through the exercises with just, a minute or less, about a minute between exercises now. Whereas before, I'd probably, even in the design of having a 4 circuit setup, I would still probably take 2 or 3 minutes between sets. So I'm able to get a little bit more training density in less time, which is great. I would say those are kind of like the main things. Oh, and then you asked about body comp. I've been more or less for the last 2 years, just 195 plus or minus 3 pounds. And it really just stays there. Like, it doesn't change much. My body's gotten pretty good at just that being the homeostasis. And if I eat a ton in 1 or 2 days to the point where I feel like, oh God, that was a lot of food, I naturally gravitate to eat less the next few days. And it's not even that I have to try and be like, Bryan, remember, don't eat the food. You need to lose those pounds you just gained. It's literally like, I'm just not hungry. So my body kind of has found that homeostasis in the mid 190s.
Nice. And then, so everything that you feared that you would lose ground, muscle wise or strength wise, that didn't happen.
No, I mean, my strength is literally within 1 rep of where it was a year ago or 2 years ago. So somebody could argue with that and be like, oh, well, you're not improving. Like, it's been 2 years and you haven't made progress. And I'm like, yeah, like, I'll make a little progress here and then I'll amp my cardio up and I'll lose a little bit of the progress there and then it'll come back and whatever. But like, within a rep or two of my top weights for reps on various movements, I don't even know, like, even if I was not doing cardio, I'm not even convinced that I would be making drastic improvements in my weightlifting now anyways, like 27 years into training. I think you just reach a point where you're in your mid 40s and you've been training that long, and gains they just don't come. And so to be able to say that I'm maintaining everything with slight improvements here and there while also pursuing all of these different cardio things and seeing improvements on the cardio feels validating.
Right, right. Are you considering now doing more races and stuff like that in the future?
Not considering races at the moment. Actually, I did just send one to my buddy last week. It's a 20K uphill run. I actually think that sounds so interesting to me because it's so far out of my comfort zone. Like, I've never run more than 6 miles, which is what, 10K. I've never run more than that at once. And so this race actually sounds pretty cool. It's in the Boulder Mountains where I live, and it's just a 20K, like straight uphill. I think you gain like 4,000 feet of vert over the 20K. And that just sounds fun to me. Like, I probably won't even be able to run the whole thing, but that sounds like something cool to train for. Give me a reason to go out and run some hills in the winter. As far as biking, I don't have one on the agenda, maybe at some point, but like I kind of said it throughout this episode, I'm much more just accepting and okay of the pursuit of health, longevity, and wellness. And where in the past, I wouldn't have been able to just check that box each day and be like, that's good enough because I need some performance pursuit to motivate me. I just feel okay with it now. Like the pursuit of wellness and mental clarity and getting older and thriving, and these things are motivation enough for me at the moment.
Right. One final question, I guess, just sort of a selfish one is, and I'm sure you're getting this from clients of yours or people that you're communicating with, is for someone on the heavier side, like obviously I'm not like yourself, not built for like longer distance, even medium distance cardio stuff. Is this how much did you find this to be a concern? Because you're also like 195, not exactly a runner build. Could be a sprinter build, but probably only if you're like 6'3" or taller. So did you find this at any point to be problematic for like your joints, knees, ankles, things like that? Because I'm a bit worried about that for myself.
Yeah, this is pretty much why I am quite methodical about how much running I do, both in a single session, but also like across a week or across a season or whatever. Most of my runs that I do are between 3 and 5 miles, and they're usually at least partially in zone 2, so that I'm not doing all of that at intensity. And I have found specifically that my Achilles, my ankles, are the thing that seem to be the Achilles heel, so to speak. I started running last year in zeros, so like zero drop shoes or whatever. They're called zeros. But I started running in these shoes because I had a propensity to heel strike in my running in the past when I used to do it. And I wanted to make sure that I was running with proper form, staying on the mid to forefoot, and not like overreaching. And I knew that if I was in those super fluffy, like running style shoes, like even a basic Asics, but going as far as like the super shoes or something like that, that it would give me an excuse to heel strike and run improperly. So I've been working on trying to increase my cadence of my running, which has allowed me to take more steps at a softer step per step, whatever. I don't even know how to say that, but less impact per step because I'm taking more steps, right? It's almost like you're a pitter pattering along instead of striding along. And that has been helpful, but still a year later, my Achilles do tend to be the kryptonite for me. And one thing I've found that's really helpful, that might help you and the listeners too, if they're experiencing anything similar, is heavy eccentric loaded calf raises. So I stand on the edge of a stair with a dumbbell, hold on to the stairway with the other hand for balance. And I'll go all the way down to the bottom to the point where like I literally could not stretch out anymore. And I'll hold that for like 2 to 3 seconds. and then accelerate up. And I've found that simply by doing those for 2 hard sets close to failure twice a week, that has a huge positive impact on the resiliency of my Achilles throughout the kind of running adventures that I've been doing.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, like because on Achilles, I saw my father actually when I was a kid. We were playing some hoops with some guys, and I saw him tearing my Achilles in front of me in a just completely random movement. He wasn't even like springing for anything or sprinting. He was just like kind of jogging for the ball, and all of a sudden he just started limping really badly, and it was a pretty memorable scene, even though I was a little kid, because I could see right there like how randomly these disastrous injuries could happen. And then I saw him just using his canes around the house for months after that.
That's so scary that that can happen even through like a slow jog, because you often hear that it shouldn't happen simply through a slow jog. It should happen through going from like a dead stop to a takeoff type thing.
Yeah.
So that's not super encouraging, but
no, it's not. Yeah, obviously you can always find things that the person did wrong. Like obviously he was not warmed up, he was not used to it, so a bunch of things. Plus, like he was already in his 50s at the time,
right?
So yeah, but anyways, good that you shared that little input. I'm definitely gonna look into that myself. So yeah, man, I think were you gonna say something?
No.
Okay, just took a deep breath.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I think we can wrap up here. You shared a lot of cool stuff with us, so thanks a lot for that. And yeah, like I'm definitely excited that I'm venturing into this. Like now I see why you and Dave were so talkative about this topic for the last 2 years. I was always just zoning out whenever you started talking about VO2 maxes and all kinds of cardio bullshit. I was like, okay, like I'll look back when they're talking about something more relevant. But now I'm all ears whenever you guys are talking about that.
Yeah, I'm really excited that you've kind of jumped on the bandwagon too. And, you know, one of the things you said in the beginning was you be able to get the newbie gains again. And I really think that that is the #1 sell for getting meatheads to start doing cardio is like, hey, dude, you've been lifting for 20 years. You know, how much more gains are you really making? You know, you want to experience the excitement of newbie gains again. This is what you got to do. And it's going to make you feel amazing and be good for your health too.
Yeah. If I can just share that, like, honestly, for me, all it took was going for a run with my girlfriend and seeing how dead I was after a certain distance and how she could still talk comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, because that's one of those instances where it's not an abstract thing, like this person is fitter than this person, but you can see it right in front of you. Like, okay, this thing that is getting you out of breath severely is still like a comfortable talking pace for this other person. Like, that means that they're that much fitter than you. And I guess that has to be a pretty inspiring or at least a wake-up call for a lot of people when they see that.
Yeah, absolutely. It would have been for me as well.
Yeah, man, cool. So yeah, please share where they can find you, anything you're up to, anything you'd like to mention.
Yeah, I have my own podcast, Eat, Train, Prosper, where we talk about lifting weights, doing cardio, and prospering and things like that. I started a second podcast that's not fitness related. It's called Life Reflected. It's me kind of just mental masturbating on topics that are interesting to me about parenting, philosophy, the pursuit of wellness and being awesome, and doing it all in our 40s. So I have some guests on that are in a similar situation as me, as we kind of discuss life and where it's going and all that stuff. And then I am subscription-based training programs, Evolve Training Systems, Paragon Training Methods. Got a blog on the website as well. And what else? What else do I do? I don't know.
Instagram?
Oh yeah, Instagram, Bryan Boorstein. You can find me there. I don't post a ton, but I update my story pretty regularly. So come follow along. I post all my workouts and stuff like that if you're interested.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to check that out. And thank you again for being on the podcast.
Thank you.